Well, tomorrow night could be a very significant night for a couple of Baltimore Ravens legends, as Terrell Suggs, Marshal Yanda, among the 15 finalists for Pro Football Hall of Fame induction. We're going to find out who it is that gets in during NFL honors. Our next guest is the man that we always turn to for anything related to Pro Football Hall of Fame voting, Talk of Fame 2. He is longtime NFL writer and our friend, Mr. Clark Judge, and he's with us again here on GCR. Clark, it's Glenn in Baltimore. It's always a great moment to get to chat with you, my friend. Thank you for taking the time for us.
Yeah, always good to hear from you, Glenn. Thanks.
I know that you know a little bit more than what you're going to be able to let on with us here, but if I ask broadly, I know that there are times where some finalists, and in Ravens history, a couple of those, did not require a whole lot of discussion. That when somebody let me know how long it went, it was a very short amount of time.
Right.
Is that always because it's obvious that like they are, or is it sometimes that there are short discussions because you just get to someone and you say, it's just not the way it works. It's not they're not a Hall of Famer in this group.
Yeah, a little of both. I mean, if you're an obvious first ballot choice, Joe Montana, Jim Brown, John Unitas, you stand up and say John Unitas and sit down. Stand up and say Joe Montana. That happened. Aaron Miller stood up. He said, "What else can I say?" Joe Montana sat down. People applauded. So you don't need to talk about those guys. You're wasting everyone's time. We all know they're going in. They're going in on roller skates. There's no talk. There are other guys who could be first ballot choices, but you want to hear a little bit more. It's not as slam dunk as it is with those guys. And this year you look at that group, and there's some first ballot considerations. Adam Vinatieri's one. Luke Kuechly's another. Terrell Suggs is another. There's some. Marshal Yanda is another. But you look at those guys, and there's more discussion about them. You don't stand up and say Marshal Yanda. People, wait a minute.
Right.
You know, some people might say, "What position does he play?" I mean, they're not going to say that, but so there's a little of both.
Was there one way or the other? And again, without giving it, was there anything that most surprised you in the discussion this year? That someone that you expected it to go one? No.
No. I mean, the most contentious was going to be Eli Manning. We knew that.
Right.
That was the longest discussion. When it went nearly an hour. I mean, that was a long discussion. Positive and not negative, but positive. And so, like, well, what about this? What about that? It was civil. It was impassioned. It was actually a really good discussion, and enjoyed that. But in terms of the other, no. I mean, this was less contentious than, say, a year ago, because there were a couple candidates a year ago that caused passions to get inflamed a little bit, but not this time. And so it went along smoothly until we got to Eli. If you take one candidate, it's an hour. I mean, our meeting lasted over 8 hours.
Sure.
So it was a long day.
Clark, the two that obviously we care about the most, you mentioned both Terrell Suggs, Marshal Yanda. To me, I've said all along, I don't know that these guys are definitive first-year guys, the way that we knew that Ray Lewis and Ed Reed and really even Jonathan Ogden were, right? Like, I think Terrell Suggs is, but I don't know that. And we've seen other, edge rushers over the years who weren't immediate first-year guys. Jared Allen, for example, right? Like,
right.
But it does seem to me that even if they don't get in tomorrow night, I think they're both Hall of Famers in general, and it might just take some time. Do you feel like that's a fair assessment?
Yeah, that's accurate. And I want to make something clear so your listeners understand this. I do not know the results. I don't.
Right.
Now, I know how the voting took place, but I don't know the results. This is the first time we've done it this way. They want to keep it secret, as secretive as they can, because there were too many leaks before.
Right.
And so I know how part of the process went. I don't know how the entire process went, and nor does anyone else in that room, because the Hall of Fame said, enough, we're getting too many leaks. We've got to plug these somehow. And that's what they're doing this year. But yeah, no, that's right. I mean, let's look at the two. I mean, Suggs, great pass rusher, right? Problem he's got Jared Allen ahead of him. Jared Allen's been waiting 5 years as a finalist. He's going to get in, I'm pretty sure. Now, again, I want to emphasize, I don't know that, but you can read the tea leaves.
Right.
He's been there as a top 10 finalist the last 2 years. That's the on-deck circle. We've been waiting there, and those guys generally have pushed forward. With this group, you go, well, he'd be a logical guy to go forward. So the competition's the problem there. Marshal Yanda, Well, he's got a great resume. I mean, he might have one. He has one of the best resumes of all these 15. The problem is his position. He
Right.
plays guard,
Right.
and there's someone ahead of him, Jari Evans, who's also a decorated guy. However, they're guards, and we don't warm up to them. I'm not trying to defend it. I'm just trying to explain it. We just don't come around to guards. Will Shields is one of the most bulletproof guards I've ever seen. It took him 4 years to get in. Jerry Kramer took him 45 years to get in. He was on the 75th anniversary team, so look no farther than that. It's not going to take 45 years for Marshal Yanda to get. Yeah, you're right. He'll get in. So will Suggs. They may get in tomorrow night. But I just think, my sense before this whole process took place was I kind of handicapped things, and I didn't have them among the top 5, 7, whatever. I just didn't have them there. So I would be somewhat surprised. However, they're both worthy, very worthy of it. To get in the first time, though, I know people feel this way, and I'm one of those. I do feel you should be one of those guys where you stand up and say the name and sit down. If you have to go more than that, I'd say it's not a slam dunk, and we probably can move some others who've been waiting ahead of him. There was no shame in going in the second year, 5th year, 10th year. As someone said to me a long time ago, what do they call the guy who graduates last in his school, in his class at med school?
Yeah, he's a
they
doctor.
call him a doctor.
Right,
all right. So you don't care whether you're first year, 20th year, but you have 20 years of modern era eligibility. And I think Suggs and Yanda will get in sooner rather than later. It could be tomorrow night, but my guess is it probably won't.
Clark Judge, Talk of Fame 2, with us here on GCR. Clark, I feel like the position that maybe people are like most passionate about in general, if we move away from what matters in Baltimore, is the wide receiver position. And I guess it kind of matters a little bit because we've finally seen Steve Smith maybe make a little bit of a move. But it feels like over the years it's maybe been one of the tougher ones for guys to break through. And everybody talks about Reggie Wayne and Torrey Holt. And like here you have Larry Fitzgerald, who's about to come up, who I assume that'll be a first-year type of guy. But can you give us a sense of maybe why it's been difficult for the wide receivers over the last 5 to 10 years to break through, and why there seems to be such a logjam at that particular position?
Because we've never had such gargantuan numbers. I mean, it's a passing league now, right? I mean, this is not to diminish the accomplishments of quarterbacks or receivers, but it's never been easier to be a quarterback in this league. I mean, you breathe on them, you get a penalty. And, with receivers, when you cross the middle of the field, I'm old enough to remember that you didn't cross the middle of the field randomly. You did it at your own risk.
Right, yes.
And I would say
Mike Curtis was waiting to dismember you. Yes,
Mike Curtis,
right.
Jack Tatum.
Yeah.
But you go back to the 2013 Super Bowl in New York. I remember one of the first series when I think it was Demaryius Thomas crossed the middle for the Broncos. Cam Chancellor took his head off.
Right.
I mean, and that sent a message. Don't go here. And now, you can go there randomly. You see what Travis Kelce lives there. The Chiefs live there with their short receivers or intermediate receivers. And you can do that where they couldn't in the past. So now you have these huge numbers, inflated numbers, and it's tough to discern between this guy or that guy. And so you have someone coming along like Torrey Holt. Oh, he has more yards through this many seasons than anyone else, until someone else comes along, and then they have more yards. And then someone else has better yards. And that's what's causing the problem. We have this huge number of people now with big numbers. I mean, I will tell you, and I've said this to you before, it's not a popular choice in Baltimore, where I used to live and covered the Colts way back when. But of all the receivers, that are up now, the guy I would choose is not one of the 15. It would be Hines Ward. And you go, well, look at his numbers. I look beyond that. I look at the impact. Look at the impact of this guy. And you saw him, and so did I. I mean, people can say what they want about him in Baltimore. You had to account for him. He could block, he could catch, he could make first downs, he scored touchdowns, he did everything. And I look at some of these others, and when I looked at Reggie Wayne and Andre Johnson and Torrey Holt, they're somewhat all the same, And Torrey Holt, I think, is probably going in this year. I don't know, but he's, we had that logjam of wide receivers. We broke it up with Andre Johnson in 2024. Holt's the next one up because he was a top 10 guy last year. I look at him and go, wait, he's the second receiver on the Rams, and if we put him in, he's the 5th starter on the Rams offense to go in? Well, it's the greatest show on turf, right? Well, apparently it wasn't. They won one Super Bowl.
Right. Yeah,
I mean, and I look at I covered the 49ers in San Francisco. Tell me the number of starters on those teams that won 4 Super Bowls on offense, the number of starters that are in the Pro Football Hall of Fame.
Is it just
Great team.
is it just the 2, or is Taylor? I'm trying to. Is it just?
It's 1. It's Joe Montana.
That's it.
Jerry Rice wasn't there for 2 of them, and
Oh,
so you got
okay,
Joe
yeah,
Montana.
for all 4. Got it. Yeah.
Yeah, and then Steve Young was a backup. Okay,
Right.
and so you go. What? So we're putting all these guys in, and that's where I think it's tough. And so now you got Steve Smith joining the fray, and yeah, he's Hall of Fame worthy. I saw him play. I thought he was a game changer. I thought he was a game changer. But you go Reggie Wayne. Wasn't he the second receiver to Marvin Harrison? Okay, Marvin Harrison then left. Then he was the number 1 receiver. How are we starting to decide between him and Holt and Johnson? They kind of look the same, and you look at their stats, they're kind of the same. But I once asked Henry Ellard a couple of years ago, how do you determine what's a Hall of Fame receiver? And he said impact. And I thought it was a perfect response. I said, what do you mean by that? He goes, yards per catch and touchdowns. And so I look at this group of guys and I go, okay, I'm taking the guy with the most touchdowns. Oh, guess what? It's Antonio Gates, the tight end, 116,
well,
a lot more.
Yeah, he's a slam dunk to me.
Wide receiver.
Yeah, Gates to me is a slam dunk, 100%. It's funny because, and yeah, you're right. Your Hines Ward take won't be popular here, but my take won't be popular here, which is like, I think Steve Smith was a Hall of Fame personality, and I was stunned by how much he still had left in the tank when he showed up in Baltimore. Like, floored.
Yeah,
by how good he still was when he showed up in Baltimore. That all said, I don't know that he's a Hall of Famer. Like, I don't know that. I know he was really good, but and again, some of this might be bias of where they were in their careers. I think Anquan Boldin was as good, if not better, just didn't have the same personality and didn't get the same amount of attention that Steve Smith did. Like, I don't know if Steve Smith's a Hall of Famer or not.
Yeah, that's a hard decision, because what they're doing is a lot of these voters are rolling out numbers and stats. If that's what you're going to give me, then let's just all disappear. We'll get Deloitte and Touche, and we'll just go down the number. Who's got the most catches? Who's got the most yards? Let's do it that way. It's got to be more than that. And I would say if you saw a Steve Smith play, you go, yeah, probably more than that. I mean, I thought he was a terrific receiver. And Hines Ward, to me, every time I looked at the Steelers, I go, when they need a play, I know who they're going to. That's why I thought Ben Roethlisberger was extraordinary. I mean, people remember one guy saying to me, like, Ben Roethlisberger Hall of Fame? I went,
no,
yeah,
that's
nuts. Be a first ballot Hall. He's going to be a first ballot Hall of Fame. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
And he said, why? I said, first of all, he won a couple of titles. Secondly, look, when you need a big play, he always gets it. Plus, he won twice as many games as he lost. Yeah. And that's where Eli Manning. I don't want to get into Eli Manning conversation, but that's where that then descends.
I'm fascinated by that one because we could talk about that for 6 hours. I don't know when to have that time. I want to give this to you, and I ask this question understanding it is not nearly as important as the center of what's going on in this discussion. But you bring up Adam Vinatieri, and for years we have assumed in Baltimore that the next Hall of Famer was going to be the kicker. And I just, is there any insight you could give about how the news of this past week might impact that? Because my gut tells me it might make his path, given that he is a kicker, it might make it a whole lot tougher.
Yeah, I'd like to see the thing play out. I know what the accusations are. I'd like to see it play out. I don't know it, as well as you do, because you live there.
Right.
And I've dealt with Justin Tucker before. It's a serious charge. I'd like to see how the thing plays out. Now, I will tell you this. We're always reminded we can only vote according to what happens on the field. And that is the way it's supposed to be. However, that doesn't mean in the back of your head you don't know what's going on. I mean, one of the most qualified candidates who could be out there is Darren Sharper.
Correct.
But he's serving, a zillion years, I don't know what it is, for, multiple rapes.
It's heinous.
And so,
heinous crimes.
Yeah, it's a heinous crime. And so in the back of your head, you can go, well, we can bring him up. No one, and he hasn't come up, nor should he, in my mind.
Right.
But you can say, based on what he did on the field,
yep.
Okay, and we have one, this year, Jim Tyrer, and he's a senior candidate.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't know if your listeners know about him, but you should look into his background, because he was one of the most qualified candidates in this field. But to me, the most qualified candidate in this field, the most qualified, is Adam Vinatieri, since you mentioned him. He's on the 100th anniversary team. He's one of the 2 best of all time at his position. Gosh, he should go in on roller skates too, right? I don't know if that's going to happen, but we'll see on Thursday.
Yeah, the Jim Tyler, and it's complicated too, right? Like I
It's
didn't know.
complicated.
I didn't know the story. Then I found out. I said, "What the hell?" And then when I was like, "Oh my god, it's a really,
Yeah.
really complicated story." Boy, I am fascinated to see how you guys handle it. Really fascinated to see.
Yeah, well, I mean, it looks as if CTE was involved, and all
correct.
the diagnostics point that way, and the people who knew, in fact, the doctor who treated him said, "I'll guarantee you it was," but he was never diagnosed as that, so that never can become part of the discussion. Even though you go, well, you didn't get CTE playing bingo, right? I mean, he probably had playing football, but that was a really delicate discussion. And if you're clearly adhering to the bylaws, you go, okay, well, this guy, he's one of the most qualified people here. But in the back of your head, you go, well, how are we dealing with this? Again, as I said, I'll use the Sharper example. And if he were up, you go, on the back of your head, I know what happened. Do we really want to do this?
Right.
And so it's a judgment that's a personal judgment. I guess you have to consult your own conscience on it.
Talkoffame2.com is the website. Clark, I know I got to let you go. You want to do a 60-second plug real quick?
Yeah, sure.
Go for it. What are we plugging?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Talk of Fame, too, is we do a lot of stories on the history of the sport, but also we do past, present, and future. And there's a lot of Hall of Fame stuff this week because, of course, that's what we center on and focus on. It's me and John Turney, who's a preeminent historian, league historian, who's consulted by Hall of Fame voters. So anything Hall of Fame related you want to get to, go to talkoffame2.com. Thanks.
Clark Judge, TOF is how you follow him. Clark, always appreciate it. Know it's a busy week down. Thank you for taking the time for us. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, appreciate it, Glenn. Thanks. Take care.